Before I forget, let's talk about the ceasefire as well. Russia and China have blocked calls for U.S. Immediate Gaza ceasefire. Interesting framing. Let's take a
Let's
look.
start in New York, where the UN Security Council has voted against a US draft resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza linked to the release of hostages. Russia and China were amongst 3 countries that vetoed the US resolution. It was the first time the US had supported calls for an immediate ceasefire in the region.
I love that the BBC's like coverage of this is like more right wing than the American coverage of this.
Having previously used its own veto to block such demands at the UN. Well, this is how the US ambassador to the UN responded to China and Russia's veto.
Russia and China still could not bring itself to condemn Hamas's terrorist attacks on October 7th. Can we just pause on that for a moment? Russia and China refuses to condemn Hamas for burning people alive, for gunning down innocent civilians at a concert, for raping women and girls, for taking hundreds of people hostage. This was the deadliest single attack on Jews since the Holocaust. And a permanent member of this council can't even condemn it. I'm sorry, it's really outrageous.
Yeah,
and it's below the
so outrageous. Bro, you've literally personally vetoed every ceasefire resolution up until this very moment where you guys conveniently wrote a false ceasefire resolution. It's so fucking crazy.
Unity of this body.
That was the US representative there to the UN just speaking a short time ago.
Biden derangement syndrome, 44. Are you a Hamas supporter for real? Hamas is the lesser evil, my friend. I'm a lesser evil voter. That's why I love Donald Trump.
Well, we know that Mr. Netanyahu has been having talks with Antony Blinken, and he has said in a statement to after those talks, which has only recently broken up, we think.
Hamas have killed far fewer children than Israel. Hamas has the Palestinian resistance is not just Hamas, by the way. The entirety of the Palestinian resistance movement, a broad coalition that featured members from every organization on October 7th, did atrocious things, make no mistake, right? Targeted civilians, did atrocities, did what amounts to acts of terror, certainly. Having said that, however, and I stress this, okay? I need you to understand this. I need you to understand one thing. Their civilian to armed military personnel ratio is infinitely better than Israel's. In totality, of course, Israel's killed far greater number of children, far greater number of women, far greater number of civilians across the board. But Hamas is the lesser evil here. Okay? Lesser evil. I'm a lesser evil voter. That's why I'm voting for Donald Trump. No, I'm just kidding. That part I'm joking about. Oof. You think Hamas cares about Palestinians? You think the Israeli government cares about Israeli citizens? They don't care about their own. Yeah, I don't think the Israeli government cares. You think this fucking dipshit cares about Israeli citizens? Really funny that you say that. Really funny that you say that. Yes, this is Bad Wolf Hacker. Same person from yesterday. Yeah. Do you think this guy cared a lot about the Israeli hostages when he... Do I think Hamas cares about Palestinians? I think every Palestinian resistance group, regardless of what you may think of them, genuinely wants the apartheid to end. Yes. And this also includes Hamas. 1,000%. Are they absolutely corrupt? 100%. Okay? Do they funnel money and purchase a bunch of real estate for themselves? Certainly. Okay? They are not moral arbiters, but it does not matter because there is a much larger power player here. Okay? There's a much larger power player here, and that is the state of Israel. And they are an even greater evil. This is my point. Individual Palestinians, no, but the people as a whole in resistance of occupation, yes. Yep. Didn't they blow up Israelis fleeing the festival? Oh, you're talking about the Israeli forces, not just the cars that were leaving the festival, but also as far as Hamas is playing a role here too. What do you mean? Playing a role in what? All covered in that Al Jazeera documentary as well. Hamas is playing a role here too. The war. Yeah, they are. They are. Their goals are to make the occupation costly. Their goal is to destabilize and cause chaos within Israel. That's what their goal was. And in many respects, they succeeded. So now, ask yourself, do you care about the actions of the ANC, or do you care that the apartheid was a far greater evil in South Africa? Do you think Nelson Mandela is still a terrorist, for example? Or do you agree with the now whitewash framing? Who's all paying for this? The people on the ground, the Palestinians, and even family members of the Israelis as well on October 7th. They're paying for it. It's always the average citizen that pays for it. Just the folks, normal folks. Exactly. Okay. So as someone who is a defender of Israel, and we've seen your arguments in the chat yesterday and even your TikToks, it should be your imperative to pressure the Israeli government. I don't know if you live in Israel or not. I don't know if you're an Israeli citizen or not, but it should be your goal to stop the apartheid, the far greater evil. The notion that Hamas is somehow made up of obstructionist outsiders is such delusional cope. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't agree with that anyway. These people are seeing their family members killed and their homes destroyed. They have every reason to fight. Of course. Just like Ehud Barak said in the chat, you guys were talking about it. Ehud Barak himself was like, yeah, dude, if I was Palestinian, I would join one of these fucking terror groups. Are you kidding me? The fuck are you supposed to do?
Mr. Netanyahu said we talk.
Why is Hamas called a terrorist group then? Why was Nelson Mandela on the terrorist watch list until 2008 when he got fucking cancer and was like about to die? Because if you are fighting against state power, especially state power that is aligned with the United States, the terrorism designation will be slapped on top of you. The IRA was considered terrorists by the British government.
Talking about going into Rafah, he said, Mr. Netanyahu said, I told him I hope we will do it with the support of the US, but if we have to, we will do it alone. We know that, of course, the US and other allies of Israel have been urging caution on that particular move. Well, let's speak to Mark Lowen, who is in Jerusalem for us. Mark, just first of all, on the UN resolution.
It's automatic, and you should probably learn more about Hamas before you stand for them. Are you talking to me? 24-month chatter? Did you say I stand for Hamas? I said they're the lesser evil. Oh, not you, the chatter.
Being vetoed initially. What is the impact of that, if any? And we also know that there is another draft resolution that's doing the rounds at the moment.
Israel and Hamas are bad actors. Why pick a side? Because there's a genocide going on, and I'm not going to sit here and act like there isn't a genocide going on. There is no both sides are bad in a genocide. I believe that the Jewish resistance groups in the Warsaw Ghetto ultimately were on the right side of history. There is no, well, they did some bad things. I believe that the Nat Turner slave rebellion, albeit violent, was on the right side. I believe that the Haitian Revolution, the Haitians that were liberating themselves were on the right side. I believe that the ANC was on the right side. I believe the IRA was on the right side. Okay? And yeah, the Haitians killed a lot of French civilians. They did. They did. Time and time again throughout history, we oftentimes overlook the many, like, chaotic, incredibly violent, atrocious actions that were committed by those who were liberating themselves. We do that because we want to create a perfect narrative that you can only resist colonial occupation, you can only resist imperialism through nonviolent means. This is not true. Okay? Because no matter what, if there is one universal principle here, the standard of violence is set by the occupying force. The standard of violence is set by the colonial force. The standard of violence was always set originally by the oppressive state apparatus. And Israel's apartheid state, which is a genocidal one, is incredibly violent. It is inherently violent because there is no non-violent means of maintaining an apartheid. When we talk about Hamas killing civilians en masse on October 7th, there is no context that justifies it. Even when we mention apartheid and occupation, I can accept that. But when it's genocide of Palestinians that's talked about suddenly, it's just war. And, well, look at October 7th. The only people justifying killing en masse are them. Yes. I've never once said that there is a valid reason to go and fucking kill civilians. Okay? I think that while terrorist is a political designation, terrorism, in my opinion, is an act. Okay? And that act is done, in my opinion, when you are broadly targeting civilians. That's it. Same goes for every group, every non-state actor. That's it. And ultimately, if justice is served, when we look back at this moment in history, if justice is served, when we look back in this time in history, we will never talk about, October 7 or any number of different things. That is, of course, if justice is served, which I don't think it will, but, or maybe it inevitably will, but it'll take a long time.
Well, it means that the resolution, of course, was not passed at the UN Security Council, Gita, because Russia and China have veto-wielding power. Now, Russia's UN ambassador said that it was a false declaration of a ceasefire, false call for a ceasefire, because the text that was supported by the US linked a ceasefire to the immediate release of hostages. So in effect was supporting Israel's negotiating position in these talks in Doha, which are still ongoing, ceasefire talks, because Israel's position is that there can only be any ceasefire if the hostages, if Israeli hostages held by Hamas are immediately released. Now, even though the US basically was sort of in line with Israel's negotiating position, it was a harder tone than the US has used before. As you noted in your introduction, previously the US had vetoed 3 previous calls for an immediate ceasefire, and they'd never used those words, immediate cessation of hostilities. So, the US was going further than they ever had, but still it was blocked by Russia, China, and Algeria. So it doesn't pass. There is a second ceasefire that draft that is going to be circulated. We don't know exactly how hard that will go. But all through this conflict, really, the UN Security Council has been paralyzed by differing positions on the war and on Israel's position in the war and Israel's offensive. We've seen the US hardened position growing increasingly exasperated with Israel, but even that, it seems, has not been enough to pass the deadlock of the UN Security Council.
And Mark, in terms of the talks that happened on the ground today, we've seen the Israeli Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, coming out of those talks and saying that he still feels that they will have to go into Rafah in order to defeat Hamas. And if they have to do that without the support of the US, they would still go ahead.
Nonviolence has its place for sure, but violent action in an effort to attain emancipation is going to be an inevitable occurrence if the state refuses to acknowledge the inalienable rights of human beings. Exactly. What is the fucking quote? It's those who resist nonviolent means of emancipation ultimately make way for violent resistance, something along those lines. It's just like when you shut out people from their yearning for peace and prosperity, you are causing them to causing them to take up violent means. You're doing that. Those who make peaceful protest impossible make violent protests inevitable. Yeah, JFK. I wonder what kind of peaceful change he tried to do that they violently resisted his dome.
Do we have any more information as to how those talks went?
All we know is that they lasted about 40 minutes, that they discussed Rafah, as you say, which is in the south of Gaza, where more than 1 million people are now sheltering, and where the Israelis are determined to send in the military in defiance of international warnings about the atrocities that could ensue. They also talked about the urgent need to deliver, or from Blinken's point of view, an urgent need to ramp up humanitarian aid into Gaza amidst those dire warnings that we had earlier in the week about famine and catastrophic food insecurity facing the vast majority of people in Gaza. The US has summoned an Israeli delegation to Washington next week to discuss.
Dude, your name is Biden Derangement Syndrome 44. Like, I'm sorry. I don't think you give a fuck about anti-Semitism, dog. I'm going to be honest with you. As someone who is like a designated Trump supporter in the chat, like, be for fucking real, dude. Like, I love this guy. You do know that Hamas has used innocent Palestinians as shields. Israeli prime minister is evil, but Hamas isn't a resistance group. They are terrorists. Nelson didn't target innocent civilians. You leftists sounding like Nazis. First of all, the fuck do you mean? Nelson Mandela couldn't target anybody. He was fucking in jail, dumb fuck. We're not talking about Nelson himself. We're talking about the groups that he represented. They're a lib. Why does he have? Oh, it's because it's Biden derangement syndrome. Oh, he's not a Trump supporter. He's a liberal. I'm a liberal, not a commie. I agree. The IDF are evil, but Hamas ain't innocent. You don't need to be innocent to still be victimized by an atrocious genocidal apartheid state. Okay? I feel like everything is coming in through one ear and getting out of the other, you know? Hamas needs to be eradicated as a political party. There's a rising anti-Semitism among the far left. You have Biden derangement syndrome? Yeah, you're right. Ask him if he thinks George Floyd deserved it. I mean, dude, do I want to know? Do I want to know if he thinks George Floyd deserved it? Because the answer that he gives us might shock you, okay? In the baby settlers quote, you were literally saying the opposite, that babies cannot be killed. These people are ridiculous. Yeah, but they want to hear what they want to hear. That's it. Saying something is the lesser evil isn't saying that they're innocent. I mean, they are victims of their circumstances. I do not believe that any singular human being, whether they are born inside of the Israeli boundaries or born in the Gaza Strip or West Bank, wakes up one morning or since birth is like, oh, I can't wait to kill whoever. Okay? People learn that kind of hatred. You can have a understandable anger, or you can have a hatred that you've learned, and that is the purest case of projection that Israel engages in. Whenever they say George Floyd did not die by the cops, no, the cops kill him. My bad. Wait, what? Oh, fuck. I meant the cops did kill him. My bad. The answer shocked me. Was right. HasanAbi was right. The answer did shock me. uh, this guy's got to be trolling. I think so too. He's pretty fucking nutty. All right.
Rafah. The US position is that Israel does not need to go into Rafah in order to destroy Hamas. There are alternatives, namely to cut off completely the smuggling routes coming from Egypt across the crossing into Gaza and feeding Hamas. But whether Israel buys that, we don't know. And at the same time as Israel is, Netanyahu is repeating almost every day his intention to go into Rafah, the ceasefire talks are continuing in Doha with the head of Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, there in Qatar, with the head of the CIA and Egyptian and Qatari negotiators. So Israel appears to be kind of keeping its
I mean, also Palestinians don't just adore Hamas. In 2019, you had massive protests in Gaza against Hamas' economic policies, which were repressed pretty brutally. The latest PCPSR poll shows about 30% identification with them, if I recall correctly. One thing that you have to remember about Hamas' civil governance, which is like obviously not great, is that Hamas is broadly supported in the West Bank by way higher margins than in Gaza. Okay? Something to remember. Something to always remember. It's the dudes that don't exist under Hamas that actually, like Hamas more. Now, of course, if there's one group that is consistently hated by every single person, every single Palestinian person, it is, of course, the Palestinian Authority, which is correctly identified as a part of the Israeli security apparatus. Rory V, thank you for the 50 community gifted subs. God damn. Champagne Socialist HasanAbi, buy my anti-capitalism t-shirts. Classic. Also, buy my subs at the top of the hour. Fucking Christ, dude. Oh my God. Right at the heels of a 50 big one, too. 50 gifted ones. Comes the top of the hour ad break, which 50 of you will not see because you've subscribed. Or you got gifted a sub. But the rest of you will see it. Here's the 3-minute ad break now.
Options open, playing to different audiences, but clearly if the Israeli military does go into Rafah, which probably could take quite a few weeks to organize given the number of people who would need to be evacuated first, that would exacerbate the already very, very fractious relationship between the US and Israel.
And Mark, a difficult question potentially for you to answer from where you are at the moment, so forgive me for asking, but do we have any real information about whether representatives of Hamas or, via any other Palestinian groupings are involved in these talks, these ceasefire talks? They are
in effect represented by the Qataris because their political wing of Hamas has been living in Qatar, basically. The sort of political representatives of Hamas have lived in Qatar. So Qatar actually plays a double or an important go-between between the Israelis and Hamas, because even though they don't have official relations with Israel, they do talk to the Israelis, but they also give residency to top Hamas officials. Now,
the 32% number is not accurate. I believe 32 would vote for Haniyeh versus Barghouti, which is not a do you support Hamas versus Fatah question. Majority of Gazans right now do support Hamas, despite its not so cool governance. Also, they're under blockade, and it's not like any government can do well under a blockade. No, I agree. There's only one figure that is currently more popular than the Hamas in the eyes of the Palestinians. The Palestinians do actually report showing way more positive approval of Hamas in times of Israeli sieges. New polls are from the PCPSR that were conducted inside of Gaza Strip itself this month after almost 6 months of fighting. Dude, it is also kind of crazy that these guys are like conducting polls on a population that's being genocided. Let's not forget. In your view, was Hamas' decision to launch its offensive against Israel on October 7 a correct one? 71% of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip said correct. 57% on December 23rd said correct. In West Bank, in comparison, 71% in March, 82% in December said correct. As far as the total, 71% think it's correct. In your opinion, in this war, who will emerge victorious, Hamas or Israel? 56% of the Gaza Strip say Hamas will emerge victorious. 69% in the West Bank say Hamas will emerge victorious. In total, 64% of Palestinians. After almost 6 months of fighting, the belief that October 7th attacks were correct has increased significantly, and the belief that Hamas will win has also increased inside of Gaza. I think these are the first real numbers showing some dissatisfaction with the current Hezbollah strategy. Satisfaction with Hezbollah's performance has declined from 63% to 52% inside of Gaza, slipping behind Qatar. Yemen's strategy, however, continues to soar in approval. Interestingly, despite the majority approving of Hamas on October 7th, support for the Palestinian Authority returning to Gaza has increased substantially, and a support for a two-state solution and peaceful resistance to Israel has also increased substantially.